I was a little sore that way.
Good evening, Kurt. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Wonderful.
So my name is Arthur Marcus. I'm the chair of the Historic Preservation Board. And I'd like to call the meeting to order at 5 p.m. Clerk, would you take the roll, please?
Mr. Bray, Mr. Jones,
Here.
Mr. Carney,
Present.
Mr. Rosa,
Here.
Mr. Chavon, Ms. Walker,
Here.
and Chair Marcus.
Here,
You have a quorum.
we have a quorum. Okay, we're now going to take the Pledge of Allegiance. We don't have a flag. We can pretend. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. No suggestion to the city in flag. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes from last month's meeting? And does anyone have any changes to the minutes? If not, I will entertain a motion on the minutes.
I move to accept the minutes as they stand.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. All persons, so now we have to talk about all persons wishing to speak to the board today must be sworn in. So please stand and raise your right hand. And the city attorney, assistant city attorney will swear you in.
If you're going to speak to the board today, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Each member of the public that wishes to speak on any item will have a length of time not to exceed 3 minutes per item, and representatives of associations will have 5 minutes. We will start with case number UDP HP 23016, 301 Southwest 14th Way. First, before we start, I'd like to ask if we have any disclosures, and let's just go around the table. If anyone has visited the property or spoken to anyone.
Nothing to disclose.
Nothing to disclose.
None.
And nothing for me. So there are no disclosures. Tricia, your presentation.
Sure. Good afternoon, Rachel Logan, Principal Urban Planner and Historic Preservation Board Liaison. The first item is for the consideration for demolition of a one-story single-family residence, a metal shed, and 2 wood frame sheds at 301 Southwest 14th Way in the Sailboat Bend Historic District. This is zoned single-family, and the property itself was built in 1971 and designed by local architect William Biggany. In the most recent architectural resource survey, this property was identified as non-contributing to the historic district, but it was identified as a potential historic landmark. There are several other properties along this street that are designed by the same architect and during the same time period. And all 4 of those structures along 14th Way were identified as potential historic landmarks and were identified as properties that should be studied further for potential designation. The property is also located in an archaeologically significant zone, and it's also located within a Broward County wetland. William Biggany is known for a lot of his residential properties within Fort Lauderdale. He also did a few civic buildings like the police station, but his residential buildings definitely show tropical elements, and they blended in with nature. So you can see that through all of the properties along the street with some of the devices that were incorporated into the design. Most prominently is the shading devices and the wooden slats that were placed on the exterior of the windows. In this property in particular, in the staff report, starting on page 3, there are the original elevations of the structure. The building itself has not changed or been modified significantly over time. It still has a lot of the elements that were originally placed within the building. There was an enclosure of a back patio. I don't remember the date exactly, and I think in 1991, it became a screened-in porch. When looking at the criteria for a certificate of appropriateness, we do have general criteria. Those are listed on page 4 of the staff report. And for this application, staff found that it did not meet the criteria. And for a certificate of appropriateness for demolition, those criteria are listed on page 5 of the staff report. And the first criterion listed is the designated landmark site, or property within the historic district no longer contributes to a historic district. For that criterion, staff found that it does meet the criterion. And then the second one is the property or building no longer has significance as a historic, architectural, or archaeological landmark, and that does not meet the criterion. The third one listed is the demolition or redevelopment project is of major benefit to a historic district. Staff listed that as not applicable because we do not have new development in front of us as part of this application. The property owner did submit 3 applications for new construction. However, they were not complete in time to make this agenda. So they will be on a future agenda once the applications are complete. Okay. So in conclusion, staff found that this application does not meet the criteria as outlined in section 472411 B3CI of the ULDR, and partially meets the criteria as outlined in sections 47, 24, 11, D4 of the ULDR. And then there are a few conditions for the consideration of the board. The first is the demolition of the structure shall not negatively impact properties within the historic district, and protection from construction debris and construction equipment shall be provided as necessary. 2, this property is located in an archaeologically significant zone, and a cultural resource assessment survey by a qualified professional is required. The completed survey must be submitted and reviewed by preservation staff prior to building permit application for demolition. And following the review of the completed survey, additional archaeological testing or monitoring comments may apply. And the third is this application is subject to the approval by building, zoning, and all ULDR requirements, including landscaping.
I have a quick question for you on your report before we go on to the presentation. You repeat through the report that it's found to be non-contributing to the historic district, but is identified as a potential historic landmark. Is that because it's not old enough now?
It is over 50 years old, but within the Sailboat Bend Historic District, the period of significance extends from 1910 through 1961. These properties, I think the earliest one was 1969. And so there's a stretch of time where there aren't structures that are contributing to the district. And it's a different type of style that is found within these structures versus what was found within the remaining portion of the historic district. But since these properties were designed by a prominent local architect, they have significant architectural features that really portray the South Florida architectural era
Sure.
and modernism era, then there is a significance there that should be further studied.
Hello. And that's it. Okay. Applicant, please join us.
Oh, the applicant is
He's
going
online,
on
Arthur.
Zoom.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
Kurt,
The microphone.
Was he sworn in?
I'm not sure. I could swear. Thank you. Can you hear?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, hi. Were you sworn in?
I was not.
Okay, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. You can proceed.
James.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us tonight and for reviewing our application.
Excuse me, could you just introduce yourself first?
Absolutely. My name is Kurt Fretham, Fretham, and I am the property owner of 301 Southwest 14th Way. I bought the property about 1.5 years ago. I am excited to be a part-time resident of the Fort Lauderdale community and plan to transition there over time. I am currently in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and talking to you through the internet or Zoom. I don't know if you were expecting a presentation from me. I'm not sure about the process here, or if you had questions for me. Maybe you could tell me that part.
Usually we do have, if you'd like to make a presentation or your architect, just a short little history about what you're doing on the property and why. I think we're at a little bit of a disadvantage because we usually have new plans or a new site plan to go with the demolition plan, but I understand that that's not available right now.
Okay, I appreciate that. A little background. We did start on my plan in purchasing the property. I love the property. I love the nature part about it. The building, I liked it too, but it is just perhaps maybe not Mr. Bigginy's best work, but that's my opinion. And so we started on house plans to build 3 new homes there and submitted them to your staff there. And in that process, it was became a concern at a staff level that we may not be able to get a permit to remove the house. So we thought, all right, let's stop on spending money on house plans if there's going to be objection to removing the house. If it's a gray area, I will be happy to finish the house plans and continue the meeting and come back next month. I just want to make sure you have full advantage of all the resources in making a decision.
Okay. One other quick-
Alternatively,
All
I
right.
suppose you could say that, no, we feel strongly about preserving this home, and then if that were the case, we would then, of course, save the home, having been forced to do that, and design a home to fit on the remaining large lot. But and somebody would probably want that, but it really starts to get out of character with the neighborhood having a large lot with likely people tend to fit homes into what fits. And so I've got one big house next to the preserved little house, and things start to look out of characters, which is also just kind of a design faux pas that we're trying to avoid. Sorry, I think you were starting to say something.
Oh, I just wanted to ask, what are you planning on the lot? One single family home?
So right now, the lot is, it's 3 parcels, 3 75-foot wide conforming lots. And the current house straddles 2 of the lots. And one of the lots is unencumbered.
Okay. Thank you.
So what we would like to do is to build 3 new homes, 1 on each 75-foot lot. That's ultimately what we would like to do at the end of the day. There has been a concern raised, I don't know where it came from, but that the preserve next door might like to have this home moved to the site for meeting place or something. And if that was of interest, I'd be happy to donate the structure just for added comment.
Great. That's good to know.
Can I ask a question? So, because it was brought up a couple times.
We should probably go around. No, that's all right. Just
Sorry.
we'll let him finish his presentation. Did you have anything else to present?
That's all for now. I didn't prepare to show house plans because I didn't think that was a part of what I should be doing today. So I don't.
Well, it's usually something that we'd like to see, just so we know where the property is headed, but you've described it and we're on the agenda. I'm sure we'll have other questions for you as we go around the board, so I would say stay on the screen, which you will be doing.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone from the public wishing to speak?
No, go ahead.
Yes.
Yes.
We have several people.
Where do you want them to speak?
The podium.
At the podium, I'm sorry, yes. The whole setup is new here.
Forgive my coughing.
That's why we're putting you at the
Thank
podium.
you, Bartley. I'm Anthony Abate, native of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I live in Collihammock. I'm also a professor of architecture at Florida Atlantic University, founding member of Balcomomo International, the Florida section, and currently serve as an appointment at the Broward County Historic Preservation Board. The case before you, determine the certificate of appropriateness for demolition, deserves careful consideration. With respect to the fact that we're all deliberating on this, thanks for having me speak. As designed and constructed, this house meets all the criteria for historic integrity, as well as the criteria for historic designation. It is an excellent example, along with the few remaining homes designed by Biggany, of his particular approach to an architecture tailored specifically to the unique tropical climate of South Florida and the microclimate of the North Fork of the New River in several Bend neighborhoods. Biggany was a student of Walter Gropius, one of the founders of the Bauhaus in Germany. who migrated to the US and led the transformation of architectural education at Harvard. Bigamy was named an honored founder by the city in 2000. He was a civic leader and a pioneer. His architecture is considered a textbook for how to build and live in the tropics, and this house is no exception. It is an exemplary case study of design of the modern period, in particular this approach to design, which is climate-based. Arguably, it is one of the most innovative and authentic periods of architecture in Broward County. The historic significance of this house in and of itself and part of a group diplomacy design in the secluded corner of our city, historic significance of the author, a local pioneer, and the leading architect of the modern movement must be taken into account. As to the criteria, and there's only one criteria that I believe applies, is whether the property has significance as an historic architectural or archaeological landmark. The recent architectural resource survey indicates that the house does, and my initial assessment of the house confirms that it meets all the criteria for historic integrity and for historic designation at the local, state, and national levels. That it was not yet designated does not alter the fact that it can be easily demonstrated that the house meets all these criteria of integrity designations. An argument can be made that the house and other houses by Bigamy in the district should be considered a contributing example to the modern period, the most significant and innovative period of architecture in our city and our county. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Margie Gavalik-Nalpa, and I am the neighbor to the north of this property. I live at 215 Southwest 14th Way, and also the president and design director of the Gavalik Studio, a firm of architects. So it's been our pleasure to live next door for 25 years. My family, my 2 children, and my husband and I have been there. And it's one of the most, it's the biggest gift, I guess, that I've received in coming to Florida. We are not alone. As you know, there's 3 other homes, and what's also important is not just the homes themselves, but the enclave, this kind of environmental sensitive enclave that really looks back to Florida in the days that have gone by, but also something that we all hope we can still retain. I'm going to just go through some of the reasons why I think this is important. As a location, it is wedged between the Sailboat Bend Preserve, the New River, the Argyle Canal, and it's part of an environmentally sensitive area in this unique Florida ecosystem. And these are from the Secretary of Interior standards, if I know you're familiar with that. The setting, the building is raised above the ground, it's oriented towards the water and surrounded by landscape. It's a fitting as part of core properties, making it unique. The design portrait, Ms. Logan's comments, the architectural design represents subtropical modernism with Bauhaus influence. So Florida vernacular meets Bauhaus. It's a very special, unique condition that we don't have, and it's over 50 years old. The materials, whilst there are not that many examples there, wood frame buildings, and I happen to live in one, so it is possible. You can survive, you can do well, you can thrive in a wood frame structure. The workmanship is a really significant vividly balanced, affordably priced, modest architecture with refined and elegant detail. And I think that juxtaposition goes to the roots of Sailboat Bend and its history as a place for everyone. I think Bigamy understood that and recognized that in the way that he designed his architecture. Feeling is the 6th element in this, and we call our house our sanctuary. It really is a place where we can reflect upon the water, the breezes that flow through. It's peaceful, and we really think that there are possibilities of how to adaptively use a building in this context that is new. Association. Bill Bigamy, as many have spoken, already contributed to many important places and projects in Fort Lauderdale. Rio Vista and Lauderdale Harvest have many of his homes, 15th Street Fisheries, Marina Bay, as well as the Fort Lauderdale, these 4 homes in Sailboat Bend. I'll skip the growth here, but you know, this is, I don't know if any of you know the Schindler House in Los Angeles. I think in the way Schindler, these experiments that architects do in their surroundings contribute to the understanding from an education standpoint, also from a learning standpoint. As neighbors, we request that the new owner consider the environment. And I haven't met you, sir, but I'd love to have a chance to do that. But we request that you consider the environment and the history of this property. There are many examples of sensitively developed project that have been adapted and reused within the context of a larger footprint that is necessary. Look just to the north of us, to the Sarasota School, for great examples of how to do this. I urge you to deny this application for demolition and ask that the owner seek an alteration suitable for this area. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good.
This sort of says it all for me.
Hometown Hotel.
It's happening in Fort Lauderdale, isn't it? It's happened across the river from where we live.
Oh,
A man
I'm sorry. You have to be heard on the microphone.
What?
I'm sorry, we can't move back to the other end.
I'm sorry, I'm slow, but
Take your time,
I get there.
no problem.
I'm only 98 years old
Wow.
and I get emotional when it comes to this area.
Well, that's why we want to get you on the microphone.
My name is Charles Willard, and I have been involved in this neighborhood since 1980 when we started with what was called a rules and regulations. What do you call that? Anyway, and I was president of the Civic Association and a member of this board of the Civic Association for 20 years. And I feel that this area bordered on the north by the canal and the river on the west and south, that it is a very unique place for anyone to live, and everyone that comes to visit us says there is no place like this. My family, this is not my house, this is my family's house. There are some 20 people involved in our family. Our enclave, as she mentioned, was McSweeney property from Broward Boulevard all the way to the river for many, many years, and they were very good friends of ours. As a matter of fact, we were anointed to be the caretakers when the last of McSweeney's, Rita, passed away, and we have been sort of looking after it to see that it stays like it is, natural. I'm a naturalist. I love nature. If you study nature, you'll know everything you need to know in life. But I just feel like that we should table this issue because there are a lot of people that we got in touch with that were unable to get here. Mr. Madar, who is, what do you call him? He's the
Trust manager,
what?
the trustee manager of
He's
the.
a trustee of the McSweeney property, and they are not able to be represented here. They should be a part of making a decision on this. I talked to Jim Noggle, the man who owned one of the properties, and he said it's a shame if we have to lose those houses that exist. And also Don and Sharon Wilkins, who were the owners of the property that this gentleman bought. They're a little bit concerned that it's not going to be what they thought it was going to be. So I think we should table this issue until we can get all of the people that are really concerned about what is about to happen.
I have one question for you. Are you a neighbor of the property?
I own property 20, lot 20.
Okay, thank you.
We have been, we came there and let's see, we started building on our property in July of '77. And we have a biggity lot,
You do.
our house. He designed it. We designed our house together. It's an old Florida style.
Right.
And we love it. Our family loves it. And we're very concerned about who our neighbors are going to be. We wish we could select them. I'd like to ask you a question. How many of you have visited the property? How many of you are on the board?
I've been there.
One.
I've driven by, I haven't been on the property.
Well, that seems to be a lot what happens with city employees or people that do that. They have an issue come up before them, but they never go out and look at the site and see what it's like there. I served on the Marine Advisory Board for 6 years, or 6, so I know. So, thank you very
Okay,
much
thank you.
for what it's worth.
It's worth a lot. Anyone else who'd like to speak?
You may have said it all.
I'm Blaze McGinley. I live at 1500 Argyle Drive. It's about 150 yards from this property. I'd like to request that you deny this request for demolition. I mean, it seems pretty obvious from what you've heard and I understand what the right financial move would be. Would be demolish all the houses and, build brand new ones. But I think it's one of the responsibilities of this board to look beyond those issues and really look at the infrastructure of the city. The term ecosystem was brought up, a special place. I mean, I challenge anyone to try to argue that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, no, okay.
Nothing really for me to think.
If no one else from the public,
I think we have
we do.
Gregory
online.
Madar
I'm sorry.
may be here as a, yes, not a board member. Tim should
No,
be as a
not
board member.
Tim, he owns my properties. Oh, I didn't see Tim here.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Greg, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear. Hello?
Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Greg Madar. As Mr. Willard said, I'm the trustee of the John McSweeney Family Trust that own the property. The property's been owned by my wife's family. Her grandfather settled there in, I think, 1930, and lived on the property until their passing. And currently, my wife and I own lots 10.5 through 12, and we're in the process of developing plans to submit to the board to build a home and locate our residence there.
And you are speaking today in reference to this project, this proposed setting. What are your feelings on that?
Well, our feelings are that we would like the whole area to maintain the character that it currently has with the homes that have been, designed architecturally to take advantage of the aspects of, natural versus anything else. And that's what we've discussed with our architect and that we're looking to incorporate. So we're hoping the neighborhood would remain similar to what it's been for the last, 80 years. So.
Mr. Madar and Tim, could you turn on your video?
There might be a technical problem for me.
It's on the lower left corner.
Hold on.
Cease video, stop video.
I only see the mute button. I'm gonna join as a. Can you see me now?
Yes, we can. Go
Okay.
ahead. Okay. Did you have anything else to add?
No, no, I think I covered it. If you have any,
Okay.
if you have any
All right.
questions, happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else online? But that was it.
No, that is it.
So if there's no one else from the public wishing to speak, we will go to board members.
If you actually wanted to see.
Thank you.
I have a process question. So traditionally, when we get like these applications for demolition, do they normally come with what they would be replacing it with?
It's not required.
Yeah, it's not required here in planning and zoning board, it's not in the code. So if you look at the criteria, if they want to, they can, but that's not required. So if you look at the criteria on page 5 for your staff report, what's listed here, it's actually or, so all they have to do is meet one of those. And then you can approve it. You don't have to find, they don't meet any or anything like that, it's just one
But
criteria.
typically,
On this-
we
Yeah,
do
on
get
the sheet, so
plans.
it's just-
So on the
Right.
top, you're saying if it meets one criteria, then it is meets
Correct.
the criteria?
Yes, so 472411D4C. So if you look there in the table there on page 5, you'll see that it's or, it's really small, but you'll see it's just one that they need to be, they don't need to be all.
Okay, and then I have another question. If the board today were to deny the application, then what would be the process if like they have an application, would it come back to the board or how does that work?
So if it were to deny, then it would have to find, the board would have to find that they meet none of these criteria in order to deny. You actually have to find all 3, they don't meet either one of them, and then they'd have to reapply
Okay,
if they choose to, or they can appeal it.
and the staff's recommendation is to provide these conditions, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood, sorry.
Thank you. Ashley, did you have any more comments
No,
while
sir.
you're speaking?
Thank you.
Okay. Richard,
Comments?
your comment.
I have been by the property before just for disclosure. My understanding that is just like the police station, a Bigelow architect. And that was not necessarily the one factor that made it noteworthy because the police station was approved for demolition, even though it's the same architect. So that does sway me a little bit and my impression of whether or not this is appropriate. It is not contributing and it could be designated, but it's not. That's going forward in the future. So at this point in time, it's not designated historic, it's not designated as contributing. My preference would be to see the owner move it so onto a lot or shift in the lot, so you had the remaining lot for further development rather than demo it. But because of these other factors, I'm kind of caught with that dilemma.
You can make that recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or stipulation.
Yes. Thank you. Alan?
First, I wanted to say thanks to our guests who came and shared their perspective. I agree with what I've heard and appreciate the staff's report and agree with the recommendations of the staff. I did have a question for the applicant, for Kurt. If I could, when you purchased the property, did you avail yourself of the opportunity to learn about any conditions associated with any plans you might have for the property?
The sellers, Donald and Sharon Wilkins, have owned the property for, the short answer is yes. To elaborate, the sellers, Donald Wilkins was a mentor under Big and me and had started, he had plans for subdivision of the property into 2 or 3 lots with the intentions of, if it was 3 lots, to demo the house. And that was given to me as a part of the sale. And so I, having them having the experience and starting that process, I just picked up on it and assumed they would be in the know. So it was certainly a surprise that, and given the condition of the home, I thought, I didn't think this would ever even be on anyone's radar to try to preserve or essentially almost hold the neighborhood down in a kind of a depressed state, really, when you look at the housing in the immediate area. Now, there was conversation about nature and preserving nature. Just because we build new houses or remove the existing houses doesn't mean that we're intending to destroy the nature. I think that's what important element of the environment there. And of course, we would work to preserve that, as I think most people would try. But the shorter answer is, we thought we'd done our due diligence by relying on a professional architect that was selling the property.
Bert, I just have one additional question, if I can just jump in for a minute. When you did buy the house, were you aware that it was in, or were you made aware that it was in a historic district?
I was aware that it was in a historic district, yes, but not that it was a historic home. And it's not, as far as I know. And this is even a new consideration that's on the table, that should it be, it was just said earlier that it should be studied as a historic landmark. In other words, it wasn't.
I understand it's not designated right now, and
Yeah.
that's not what is before us today.
Okay.
And I put something in, we'll be willing on Jim Nagel's house, we'll take it and move it to our lot.
Okay.
Rather than destroy it.
Let's take that into consideration.
You guys pay for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great segue, you know.
Absolutely.
Richard hit on a great point, and I'm really struggling with the idea that we've clearly made determinations to allow for demolition for non-contributing homes on past agendas. We've done that, right? And the police station is probably the one that comes to mind here. I didn't put together that it was the same architect. With that in mind, it's a tough call, because I can appreciate where the architectural integrity is here. You can appreciate the nature of this street. One pointed question, you mentioned you're a part-time resident. Did the house in any way have any damage from the flood or anything that happened a few weeks ago?
I would say it got wet, but
It got wet. Okay.
We all got wet.
It's in a flood zone, correct?
it's in a flood zone, and so rebuilding it, we would have to raise elevation, because we wouldn't want that to continue happening. Yeah, my car in the driveway, got full of water.
Okay.
Would you be open to relocating the property either on your property to get it defined within conforming setback lines, or to a neighboring property? Not considering cost for a moment, would that be feasible for you in terms of,
As long as it's on the water.
a possibility
Put it on the water.
to keep the house within the defined folios that you have? It's sort of a two-part question. Would you consider keeping it and moving it? Because I think right now, if you look at the aerial, it's between 2 lots, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, would you consider if it were conforming to moving it? Because that's part of a certificate of appropriateness application. You can check the box where you indicate you prefer to relocate it, even, and I'll let Tricia clarify this, even if it remains on the existing property. I don't know if that's technically a relocation, but moving it on the existing lot, whether that's the ones to the north or the south.
I would entertain or be open to that idea. It's not my first choice, but I would be open to that. I had gotten a quote on having it moved, and the challenge with moving is I'm afraid your building department is going to ask for a lot of things to be brought up to current code, and to the extent it might cost me more to move it than just to build a new house, and then I still got an old house. So there's a practical manner and I don't know if there's a wand you can wave with the building department that doesn't require all that to happen, but,
We do have exemptions for historic preservation through the Florida Building Code.
Did you hear that, Kurt?
yes.
Okay.
So Kurt,
Richard,
two-part question. So the second part is, would your preference be, or would you be open to moving it off your lot if it were to remain either in Sailboat Bend or in another part of the city? I'm not considering cost here. I want to put that on the table. But would you be essentially willing to use the word donate the house?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Good.
So maybe the idea of tabling isn't the worst idea, you know?
It's enough.
So there's a separate application for relocation. So
Right.
essentially what he'd have to do is either withdraw this application or you would find that it meets none of the criteria and deny it. But you can't, segue it or relocate. It's a completely different application.
I appreciate
If he
that.
withdraws it, does that cost him again to reapply?
That's correct, yeah.
So either way, have to pay to reapply again. Okay.
But apart
That's
from
what
all,
makes this
there's a procedural aspect is that he could then reapply for demolition later if withdrawn. Right, it's not like it's withdrawn with prejudice, it's withdrawn, it could then be brought again under a demo. If he were to bring that, if we would decide not to relocate, he could bring a demolition with a set of plans, let's say, for what he's been proposed to build.
Yeah, if you
At a
would
later
like
date.
to,
Right.
he doesn't have to bring the plan, so we have to make sure
Understood.
he's not denying or whatever based on.
It's not
that's
contingent on that.
required. But if he wants to relocate, I'm not sure what he's relocating, but he can
Yeah.
apply for a demolition on whatever he'd like in the
Okay.
future, but
Okay.
I just wanna.
Well, I think Tricia pointed out a great item in regards to exemptions. I don't know if I've ever considered.
Good.
But I just want to ask it one. The applicant meets the criteria for demolition as is stated.
In your staff report, he meets the first criteria according to staff. So he's already fulfilled the requirement in the code. Because it's or, so you don't even need to go any further. If you choose to, you can, but it's just that. You would have to find that he doesn't meet any of this in order to deny it, all three,
Right, but he does.
according to staff.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you. Tim, we're gonna say hello to you online. Would you like to, I think you're on mute. You're on mute.
Well, that's a good thing. Hold on a second. Did you hear me?
We hear you.
Oh, okay. Thank you, and I apologize for my mistake. I'm sorry I came in so late. I'm not going to hold this meeting up. I'm listening and absorbing, and I'll wait till you guys decide what you want to do. I won't make everybody repeat everything that you've already jawed around with. So please move forward.
Okay, thank you. Dave? David?
I'm Don.
Sorry,
I got nothing to say at the moment.
nothing to say.
Right at the moment, that's
Okay. Well, I have a few comments. As an architect, I've always admired Tiffany's work, and I really feel that although this structure may not be formally designated, I feel it's definitely historic. It's a real example of the mid-century era, and unfortunately, none of our codes in this city, as I've been saying for years, have been updated to include mid-century buildings. So that the code for Sailboat Bend ends at 60 or wherever. And this house is certainly architecturally part of the neighborhood, and environmentally, I think it is too. I came in here with the same idea that Richard broached, and Richard agreed with, that I really think one of the ways to solve this property is to preserve the house, either it could be moved to a part of the property. I've seen many places like this in South Florida with the existing house, the smaller house, that may be totally different in style than the new house to be built, is moved to a part of the property where it becomes a home office or a guest apartment or something as part of the property. So either that, or if I think the board sounded like some members at least would be open, as I would be, to if you wanted to donate it and have it moved and relocated somewhere else where the house could still be enjoyed in the neighborhood and the architecture could be saved. I do think that an adaptive reuse, which is something we don't do enough of in this city, is something that would be very beneficial in this case. And that's basically what I had to say. I really believe that historically, it should be designated, as I've said, not to repeat the issue. And I would urge someone to make a motion, since I can't, to reserve the house and either relocate it on the property or elsewhere in the neighborhood on another property.
I haven't done a search to see what other properties that he's designed or built in the Fort Lauderdale area. But clearly some of these other people probably are aware of it, but even in Coley Hammock or Victoria Park or other neighborhoods, why aren't we designating those houses because of the house and the architect, rather than saying it's in Sailboat Bend? Now suddenly let's designate it as important. So it becomes kind of a catch-22 when we think it's important house because it's in Sailboat Bend, not because it's in Fort Lauderdale or any other neighborhood in the city of Fort Lauderdale. I think that's unfair to the neighborhood. I mean, it's important, but it's not contributing. You know what I mean? It's not part of Sailboat Bend in the sense of it's not contributing to the original designation of Sailboat Bend. So that's why we're caught in this scenario. It would never have come up before this board if that were the case. Because like I said, there's probably other properties in Fort Lauderdale or Bigelow property that are still out there that can easily be demoed and would never come before the board.
We've been talking on this board about mid-century buildings for years now, and it's been increasingly difficult with the lack of support in the community, as I will say, to get these buildings preserved, get them saved. I mean, there's ones being demolished as we speak. The Bayview office building has been dismantled, and that was a major loss to the community.
Is it upon this board to designate things, or is it the city that's supposed to be doing? Because my appearance is that the city necessarily is the one that drives these suggestions rather than.
We as a board had passed on to the city commission the idea of designating historic districts thematically, such as you could have a by architect, even though they're not located adjacent to one another, they would be in the city. I think one of the things I was going to ask is what happened at the Planning and Zoning Commission, but I think that's later on. And unless you want to say
The
so now.
Planning and Zoning Board recommended denial, but I suggest that we stick to this application.
Yeah.
What is,
Talk about
for you
that
just to
afterwards.
clarify, is not a relocation application. You're only supposed to consider the
Right.
criteria for demolition.
So basically,
If he chooses to withdraw the application, then he can apply for a relocation, but relocation is not a part of this application. It's a separate application.
okay, so after we vote, the owner has the choice to accept the vote, whatever we vote on, or he can withdraw it and reapply based on our
It
comments.
would be prior to your vote, so once you vote, it's done, so he can appeal if you choose to deny it, or he can be satisfied with an approval, but he can appeal at the city commission if he chooses to do so.
Another funny, at the very beginning, my dilemma was that the city of Fort Lauderdale, when they told down the police station, there wasn't an uproar from the community about this architect. Now it's an individual house, suddenly there's an uproar about this architect. So I have a little bit of a dilemma with making it about the architect.
Well, and I also
Well,
think at
it's
some
also the
point,
quality of the architect.
I also think at some point you have to follow the criteria that's set out in the code, and we, if you have staff saying that it meets the criteria to approve, they're just asking for conditions, I think that matters. I mean, it's not, if it meets the criteria that is currently on the books, then we need to be following those criteria so it can be applied equally. If our problem is something with the criteria, then we should be making an effort to try to change that criteria through whatever means that is, through appealing to the city commission or however. But I do feel like you have to provide some level of standard for homeowners. And if the code says A, B, and C is the requirement, and if you meet that, And I do think as a homeowner in the community, I would expect for my home or any home that you bought to be able to, there has to be some kind of objective criteria.
Actually, although I would respectfully disagree with you on that,
That's okay.
because we as a board don't always accept what the city code says.
Their guidelines.
Their guidelines. We've gone in our own direction. But I think our mandate here is to hear what the city has to say, hear what the applicant has to say, and decide what has merit in the case.
Just for clarification, though, this particular code provision is not a guideline. That's actually the ULDR, that is not a guideline. So just to be clear, because I know there may be some, there's a difference between the guidelines versus the code, so I just want to make sure that's not a guideline.
So would you just go over to the board one more time, what our options are,
So
so someone can make a motion?
your option is either to approve it, and you can approve it without staff conditions or with staff conditions. You can deny it, but keep in mind that your basis for denial, it would have to be that every single subsection here is not met, all three. So I suggest if you would like to deny it, you should read over all of that and be prepared to articulate on the record why you choose to deny, because under Florida statute 166.033, you have to actually state what code section applies and the factual basis for your denial. Otherwise, it's very difficult to win an appeal unless you establish that. So just make sure that you lay out what it is if you're going to deny. But keep in mind, relocation is not a part of this application. So I'm really trying to protect the board, because if you put relocation in there, very tough to defend.
I put it to recognize Mr. Abate, because he does that.
Well,
Can we do that now?
you did close the
We
public
did.
hearing. If you choose to reopen it, you can, but keep in mind, if you reopen it, then everybody can speak. So it's up to you if you want to reopen it.
My question for the applicant is that before we even go that direction, are you willing to withdraw the application and consider relocating it before you come further in the process? So we don't even have to vote tonight.
Hi, what I'd like to propose, if this would be maybe some common ground, is that I'd like to get approval on the demolition, but not act on it right now. We could put a, I don't know, 90-day stay on it with the intentions of seeing, I think there was a neighbor that raised his hand and said they'd like the home, or maybe the preservation park would like it, or some other entity. And if we can find a viable home for it, no pun intended, but that I'd be open to working with that party on those arrangements. But I hate to say yes, I'll work to find another location for it, and it just lingers and goes on into for a long period of time and get stuck there. I don't know if that would be a compromise that the group of you could see.
Just to clarify, okay, so in the code, there's a section that basically says that private agreements, the city does not have any jurisdiction over that. So if he chooses to make a deal with someone else, we don't have a say over that. So that's on him, whatever he does. So that's not a part of the application. In other words, he can't enforce the deal that he has with some other private party unless it's in our code.
Right.
Is what governs what the city does.
So I'm unclear on this. If we voted to have the building move somewhere,
You can't.
we can't do that. So he has to make a decision on his own, but wouldn't he have to bring it before the board
That's correct, but.
at that point?
The only way you could do that is if you deny it.
Deny it first.
Or he withdraws and he's not agreeing to withdraw.
Okay.
So you have to address the application that's before you. A relocation is not before you.
Okay.
What you're saying, Sherry, if we do denial, it'd be easy for him to appeal that based upon the,
Depending.
My suggestion is, if you have a factual basis for each subsection here, then it's a lot easier to defend rather than doing it based on
gotcha.
something else that is not applicable to the code. So for example, a site plan, not in the code, you lose. If someone just really likes the property, not in the code, you'll lose. You have to go through what's here. So
Gotcha.
that's a suggestion. If you want to deny, I suggest really reading through this and whatever facts you've heard, does it go to the criteria or not? So it's what did you hear today? And what did staff say? That's what you should consider, but not anything else.
This is distilling down to the fact that it is actually meeting the criteria for demolition. And furthermore, I just thought of an exact, very similar case, well, not binding on the board, where there was a certificate for demolition. It was a very contentious sort of debate at the time, but it was the corner of Southwest 4th and Southwest 12th. They demolished a non-contributing property for 4, let's just say, atypical properties that were going to be proposed as new construction, and we approved it. We approved that. So this is almost identical.
Yeah.
With the exception that it's on the water, right?
Okay. I'd like to take a moment and I'm gonna reopen the public comment.
Can I just make a suggestion? I know you were handed a sheet of paper, so
I don't want to.
Yes.
It's up to me to say.
okay, how it works is
I'm not saying.
because of the sunshine, you have to share whatever that is, if you've looked at it or spoken about it with someone
I
else.
didn't look at it because
Okay,
I'm
okay.
trying to do the
So,
meeting.
Probably
So
that
that's why I
person
was-
should retrieve their paper then, because that is for the entire board, if you, and that's a public record, so
Okay,
you're, you know. So are you giving
I
that to the
submit
board?
this to the public record.
Okay, so you can read it now, and that's for the entire board, so the entire board would have to read that.
since we've reopened the public comment, why don't we have Mr. Abate read it and say
Okay,
his comments?
can you go to the podium so
Yeah.
it's closer to that speaker there? And just state your name again.
Anthony Abate, Brooklyn, Peace Out. Speaking. I apologize for saying this earlier. I will submit this to the record, including all the strikeouts. I would like to point out that criteria 1, as identified in the staff report, and with all due respect to staff, is not applicable. Because the property was not considered a designated landmark contributing to a larger district. Not designated, therefore, that criteria is not applicable. The fact that it was not yet designated doesn't alter the fact that it can be demonstrated that it meets all criteria for historic designation. But it's in terms of the ULDR, the code is very clear. It must be designated and considered no longer contributing. It was never designated, so therefore it is not applicable. And I apologize to staff.
Thank you.
I don't interpret that the same way, because if you pivot on the word or, it then lines out property. So I don't know how we're ending on landmark designation only. When clearly, if we want to read it, it's designated landmark, comma, landmark site, or property. It's a property. Or property. Or. But it's a property. I mean, we're sitting here, I mean, are you saying it's not a property within the historic district?
It is not a designated.
You can't have any
I suggest, did you close the public hearing?
I'm closing the public.
I suggested the debate be between you. all.
Understood. Thank you.
Richard, continue.
Yeah, that's my point. I mean, and maybe I would love to have an interpretation by the board member on maybe, or even the city attorney, where that section of ULDR.
I do agree with you. It says or property within the historic
Right,
district.
which
So
clearly,
normally, if it's already designated, we wouldn't necessarily have to say that. So it's because of the property.
Right.
within the historic.
so therefore it's an applicable fact to apply to this case, in which staff found that the application meets criteria.
Yes, that.
So if we want to articulate why this should be denied, then we've got to come up with a very interesting and this full reason, articulating why this is not meeting the criteria.
Richard, based on your super attorney powers, is there one we can find here? Because here's the thing here, I'm sure, if we pull something out of our butts, it can be easily defeated in appeal. I don't want to waste anyone's time.
The fact that staff has identified that it meets the criteria in subsection 1, the fact that I can recall the precedent where it's almost an identical application that we approved probably 4 to 6 months ago. I can appreciate where the architectural integrity is here, but based on the fact that it's not contributing, it says all it needs to. It's not designated. We're not going above and beyond to take a designated property and then still, in spite of its designation.
I have a problem, as I said earlier, because I think the city codes are insufficient. I think the codes for Shell Oak Bend are insufficient. Because any houses from the mid-century period are not recognized anywhere in the code yet. Everything's unofficial.
Right, but it's not
I think
modified.
this would be, I know, I see what the wording says here, but, it's kind of vague. I mean, really, or property, I mean, any.
It says or property within the historic district, so it's actually very specific. It's a property within the historic district. This is a property within the historic district.
So how do we say that it's a property that should be designated, should be historically designated?
So that's a different section of the code. I think this specifically applies to demolition. So when you're considering a demolition, that's not a part of this particular subsection.
Richard, move this along and make a motion.
I'm Arthur.
Oh,
It's all right, we're even
yeah,
now.
we're even now. I'll make a motion here just because I think we're just going around in circles and circles and circles. Motion to approve the resolution for a certificate of appropriateness for demolition of case number UDP HP 2306 located at 301 Southwest 14th Way, based upon the findings of fact based on facts and findings of the allied and staff a memorandum. And is subject to the following conditions.
You get all the conditions on page 5? Staff report?
Yeah, based upon the following conditions, staff please.
I'll second that motion.
Can we have a voice vote?
Yes, is Mr. Chabon voting?
Yes.
Yes, they don't have to vote to allow him to attend the Zoom.
No, because of that emergency order that we had, there's an exception now.
Oh, okay. Do that this afternoon. Okay, Mr. Bray,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Carney,
Yes.
Mr. Rosa,
Yes.
Mr. Chabon,
Yes,
Ms. Walker,
Yes.
and Chair Marcus.
I'm voting no. I really feel that this is a mistake, and I think this board should take more stands on properties that are historic. And I think it's a shame that this building may be destroyed. I would hope that the owner may talk to whomever his neighbors are and see if he can donate the home. Can we recognize the owner to say something? Please.
Hi, I just want to share that I'm very willing to work with the city or any other private party that would like to and donate the home, that they could use it in a way that preserves or whatever the private party or neighbor or the city would like to see. And my contact information, Tricia has it. Feel free to reach out to her, and or it's on the application as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Next, please. Okay, our next project, give me a moment, too much paper,
Yeah.
is case number UDP HB 23018. 1016 Waverly Road. Tricia. Oh, first of all, do we have any
Disclosure?
disclosures? Thank you. Any disclosures?
No.
No disclosure. Tricia.
This application is for a certificate of appropriateness for major alterations for the installation of trees in the right of way at the Rivermont Archaeological Site. The subject property is part of the Rivermont Archaeological Site that's designated by the city and is used by and is on the National Register of Historic Places. It is used as a public park, and the applicant is requesting to install trees within the right of way, including 6 wax myrtle trees, 6 buttonwood trees, and 1,200 fern sprigs scattered throughout the right of way swale. The property is, since it is designated as an archaeological site, there needs to be consideration for any time there's ground disturbing work at the site and how that interferes with the known area of the archaeological site. So in this case, this proposal was reviewed by an archaeologist hired by the Parks Department to take a look at the area where the trees would be placed. In their testing, they did discover positive archaeological material in the location where the trees would be placed and where the digging would occur, and recommended to not do any digging in that location because it would cause an adverse effect to the archaeological site. So best practices would be to not dig in this location, and better practices would be to find an alternative to put something in the swale. So using a planter or plant a series of planters, using a small amount of fill and putting in some sort of ground cover. And then the last option would be if this application were to be approved, to allow for the digging to occur, but have an archaeologist on site to monitor the work. Again, this is considered an alteration to the archaeological site, so staff can approve this level of alteration to a designated archaeological site because it will cause the adverse effect.
So question,
Yes.
why are we mentioning that the option could be to dig and have an
Well,
archaeologist?
just giving.
It sounds like it's gonna be a lot of trouble.
Yeah, it's the different levels of archaeology review. So the best option would be to leave it alone and not dig, and to find an alternative. Because even though the digging may be minimal at this time, it's still, in that particular site, there is material that's significant to the site very close to the surface. So a minimal amount of digging causes an impact to the site.
Okay.
But I wanted to outline all the different options
Thank you.
moving forward, yeah. So looking at the criteria, the general criteria on page 2 of the staff report, criterion A, the application does not meet the criteria because of the ground disturbing work within the swale would cause an adverse effect. B, the relationship between such work and other structures on the landmark site or other property in the historic district. This application meets the criteria because there's not a structure that's included in the application to be altered. C is discussing the archaeological significance and the extent in which it will be altered. Again, any ground disturbance is considered an adverse effect in this particular location of the site. So the application doesn't meet the criteria. And then D is denial of a certificate of appropriateness would not deprive the property owner of all reasonable beneficial use of the property. And then going on to the major alteration section of the code, the only applicable criteria is H. And that's every reasonable effort shall be made to protect and preserve archaeological resources affected by or adjacent to any acquisition, protection, stabilization, preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, or reconstruction projects. And it just is the same response in that case. So the application doesn't meet the criteria. In summary, the application partially meets the criteria in section 472411 D3CI and does not meet the criteria as outlined in section 4724 D3CII of the ULDR. And there are 3 conditions outlined in the staff report for the consideration of the board if this application is to be approved. The first one is an archaeologist must monitor all ground disturbing work, and a monitoring report must be submitted to preservation staff within 60 days following the completion of work. 2, if unmarked human remains are encountered during the installation process, then excavation in the vicinity shall halt immediately, and the property owner shall alert city's preservation staff to coordinate the discovery and take measures to implement chapter 872.05 Florida statutes as it pertains to the discovery of unmarked human remains. And 3, this application is subject to the approval by building, zoning, and all ULDO requirements, including landscaping.
Thank you. Are there any disclosures?
I've been by the board many times, yeah.
Can we already disclose? Oh, we did it already.
Yes, we did, I'm sorry. Is there an applicant here to speak, please?
Good evening. My name is Kimberly Pearson. I am the Parks Manager for the City of Fort Lauderdale. I work directly under Enrique Sanchez, Deputy Director, who is the signee on this application. This park is one of the parks in the district that I manage. We were just before you not too long ago and put up the perimeter fence. And now we're looking, now that the park is open, we're looking to manage what we see becoming parking problem on that swale. Now that the park is open, William Major Lauderdale Park is to the north. And that is a one-way road through there and has a no parking lane next to it. So the only area for people to park that want to come, besides pedestrians, obviously, they're parking in that grass swale. We see it becoming muddy and certain areas are becoming just dead grass from hot cars parking on there. When Tricia and I first started kind of talking, well, when my director was talking to the neighborhood association, we were kind of trying to come up with ideas so that we would not disturb the swale area. If you look at the survey has geographical points or topography points showing that Major Lauderdale Park is a little bit higher. And then of course, Rivermont is a little bit higher. And the purpose of a right-of-way swale area is to collect and hold stormwater. Obviously, we've gotten too close of a look recently with how much stormwater, but just a regular, usual or standard afternoon rain shower, that swale area is meant to collect and hold water. Furthering the point of when it is wet throughout the summer, it's going to be muddy. Number 2 is that we do not want to add soil to the swale area and burn it up. We are not going to pursue putting structures or planters in the swale area. And we thought planting trees would be the least, I don't even know what the word, the least interruption on site, because it would be, it would line the street and it would be trees kind of considered a green infrastructure point that would hold traffic back from there. We thought of just going with the ground cover and just having plain ground cover through there. When you have ground cover and it's not a curved perimeter around there, the vehicles cheat in on that ground cover and don't respect that area as much. And if we're going to go and plant something and beautify it, kind of protect that space, we would prefer to do it correctly from the beginning, which is to have tree structures there and then have the ground cover on top of it. When we first talked about planting things there, honestly, we thought that the top area we would be putting trees in was already the spoils of the sidewalk work that was done for handicap ADA reasons, and there was no monitoring on site when that happened. So we honestly thought that the top foot or so that we would be going into was already the spoils from when they dumped and went and shoveled all the soil to the right-of-way area to put new sidewalks in. We did not have any intention of going and saying, we're gonna wreck this midden. We love having this archaeological gem in our neighborhood and really are interested in doing our best to help protect it. So we thought this natural approach would be the best option.
I have a question.
Yes.
Seeing what the archaeologist has said, what are your thoughts on, are there alternative ways to achieve what you're trying to do here? as they mentioned in the report.
We're not going to be adding soil or burning it up. Because all that would do was push the flood water or
Right.
the rainwater.
What about above ground planters?
We are not interested in doing planters we've had planters we've tried it before. And the disrespect from vehicles is a maintenance nightmare for us. And it never looks good for the neighborhood. It's just going to always be something that's cracked or run over or shifted or it's just not respected.
Well, how do we put together the Parks Department and the archaeologist to get something that will work on this site?
Well, we have every intention, and from the very beginning, we have had the archaeologists working with us. I'm nervous to even walk on that site without having the archaeologist there. I've learned so much from them. Yes, I've learned so much from them, just having them visit with us for different things that we're talking about. So we have every intention of having the archaeologist with us every step of the way. We had always, from the beginning, thought we were gonna have him there to do this filtering and sifting of soil to begin with.
Okay,
We were hoping that the board would support us planting the street trees and the ground cover with the archaeologist being monitored.
okay.
And any kind of check stop that the staff's report had in there. Immediately, if we find something that throws up a flag, we will halt and stop. Again, our hope is that we're going to alleviate an eyesore in that swale area because we know what's coming and we're trying to be ahead of it and plant something there that'll do well and eventually be beautiful. And then to alleviate the parking, we're hoping on that north side where it's striped and it says no parking, we hope to have maybe 2 parallel spots put there, but gonna be through transportation and mobility. We're not doing anything without there. And then of course, if it needs to come before you, then it will. But for now, we're just trying to deal with the mud that we're expecting through the summer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak? Our former chair.
Good afternoon, everybody. David Geiner, 416 Palm Avenue. I'm lucky enough to own both of the properties on either side of that midden, so for less than 20 years, I've been watching that original antique house. Another problem with what happens when you don't know what's going on first and you give a demolition permit. Down it went. Why? Because the guy had some very smart cookies, lawyers, etc., still argued that, well, we looked at the basement of that house and we can't really tell where the old house was and where the new house is. Therefore, it's mixed match and down it goes. So why do I bring this up? I 100% support Jim and Enrique, who have done wonders on that park. Now, because you haven't all down there, and I've seen it all, she is absolutely right. Every fence and post, and that fence on both sides was dug by an archaeologist. They collected it. I went to every archaeologist that was digging and said, what do you guys find? Nothing unusual, it's just the usual stuff. Guess what? I already knew that that's what they would find because I've done 2 digs on my property. And that's what my archaeologist said too. It's the usual stuff. And it is the usual stuff. It doesn't matter what they're finding there because they have found it in every hole they have done. What have they done so far? All around the house when it was torn down, okay? Now, instead of preserving the basement, which is the most remarkable thing, which the Shell house in a shell midden did when they had a basement too, they took out the construction and exposed the wall. So it's like an ant factory. You see all the levels. That's what's important. And that's what Kim is pointing out. Every time a truck delivers, it goes on a swale. Every time the city wants to dig, and they did when I first moved there. We had no sewers in Sailboat Bend. They put in a sewer, they dug up the whole thing, then we all had to dig to connect. That swale is so torn up, and the things that they're finding are not in the right order because they're all mishy-mushy. Every time a truck comes and have to deliver to my house or anybody else that's there, they go right onto that swale because there's no other place for it. It is vastly disturbed. And all you need to do is have one of the archaeologists come. Look, what do they find so far? One place, not on the swale, inside the middle, a blue trail bead. Great bead, it was put in after the period of significance by the Seminoles, or way after with the westward. They were much earlier Indians there. And they found a tooth, a mysterious tooth, but nobody bothered to decide whether it's contemporary or not. So archaeology, and besides the PhD I had in psychology, I also have one in anthropology. Archaeology is not a science, it is history recorded, okay, and it's a social science. The archaeologists follow the methodology, but they don't make hypotheses. Not satisfying, you know, to make a hypothesis, which means they have to tell you why are they getting when they study all these things, record them all at what level, but they have to make predictions and then test them out. That's not what's going on there. And Chris can tell you how many different holes they've already dug. So many, and they're not gonna stop. Okay, every time we get a chance to dig, they'll dig. But she's doing it right, and that's exactly what you guys ought to realize, because you haven't been in there like I have. That swale is a mess, okay? Inside the property, maybe a different story. But I guarantee you, you're not gonna find anything that's revolutionary.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else from the public? If not, we'll close public comment and we'll open it up to board comments.
Mr. Chairman,
Don,
I can make a motion.
no, we have to talk first.
Do we have to?
I have to go around and ask everybody.
All right, well, I want to make a motion to approve.
What are your comments?
Oh, this is it's a slam dunk no brainer. I'll have to make the motion to approve this.
Yeah, but let's listen to everybody else. Okay. Ashley.
Just a suggestion, whenever there's a motion, there should be right away someone who seconds it, otherwise it dies.
Oh, okay.
So.
We can't make I can't make a motion. I motion to approve the resolution for a certificate of appropriateness for major alterations under case number UDP HP 23018. Located at 1016 Waverly Road, based upon the following findings of fact, based on facts and findings as outlined in the staff memorandum. And is subject to the following conditions. Conditions reflect what the three conditions reflected on page 3 of this paper.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second is by the tree.
So we can choose to have discussion or not.
Well, let's go around, see if anyone has anything to say.
I'm totally in favor. I appreciate the diligence the city's done. They clearly have engaged, you know, someone very qualified to speak to what's going on, and
Okay.
I think the public, you know, Mr. Kramer's kind of comment on it. You're not gonna get a floor front row seat that he's had,
Right.
so.
Any comment?
I'd just like to understand, like, you're doing this in the swale when the property itself is on the other side of the wall. We have never once ever did an application in the public streets. So this is a little mystifying to me why it even came up, because there are signs that are dug and posted throughout Devil Bend, and they've never come before.
We've done things in it for in different public departments.
Not in the swales.
I can't address that.
Because every single, it seems like every other week,
Well-
there's a new sign going up in our neighborhood, so they're digging to punt that sign in the ground. Why is that happening? It's not coming before the board then. When Florida Power and Light comes in and digs, destroys the entire swale, that's never come before. So it's a mystery to me, like when something's in the public right of way like that, that it would even come before us, because it has been so disturbed between the trucks and the roads and everything. So my sense is like this should never have come before us to begin with.
The city doing it, so they want to make sure everything's done right.
Right, but it's not part of the lot.
All right, you have that. Okay, so. I have one question for the applicant. Where's the applicant? Oh, there you are, sorry. You're talking about trucks and people parking on the swale. Are you putting in a concrete curb or something to prevent people? You're not,
No,
because there's no curbs anywhere in the neighborhood.
there's no curbs there and we don't want to impede the flow of, stormwater runoff.
Ah, okay.
Unless
Do you
put
really
it green.
think,
Right.
do you really think that the trees and the planting, well, obviously it'll inhibit people parking their trucks
Mhm.
there? Okay,
And we specifically chose, native species
right,
that can handle being wet.
okay.
And, wet and dry and wet.
And just one, I'm sorry, one more question. You're specifying two different types of trees.
Mhm.
And it looked arbitrary to me as to why there's two trees. Is there something
Yeah,
about the
one is a canopy-
locations?
one is a canopy tree and one is an understory tree, because you have one section here that has an overhead utility. And then you
Okay,
have an existing oak tree that comes out and over, so we didn't want to have it.
understood. So we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Next on the agenda, we have the communication to the city commission. I don't think we have any,
Well, that would be up to the board if there
up to the
were
board.
any.
Well, I have something I want to introduce for the good of the city, but before we do that, my question earlier about the thematic districts, that was denied by the
So
commission.
it was recommended.
Recommended for denial from the planning and zoning board,
Right.
so we'll go before the city commission and which meeting?
At this time, it's scheduled for June sixth. It was scheduled, a
Since
couple
I-
weeks ago, but we had to move a
I'm
lot
just,
of
I'm
things.
glad
last
it
minute to
was. Since I originally brought this up to the board and it finally made its way to the commission, I really think that the planning and zoning board erred in its decision because they did not understand what was going on. Their comments were that we have the right in the city, under the city charter now, to designate a building already, which we do, but we don't have anything in the city commission, the city permitting to allow us to do a thematic district where you can do non-contiguous buildings. So I think they were going on the wrong information. How do we get that to them? Do we write them a letter?
The board attorney assigned to that, I did explain it to them, they're just not in favor of providing that sort of authority. So they're just not. according to-
Why?
They were aware of what it is, it's just they're not in favor of it, according to what I heard.
Any comments? I mean,
I don't
you
wanna.
can't do that, okay.
Yeah.
So it will come before the city commission then.
It's currently scheduled for June sixth, but it's up to the city manager, he determines what the agenda is, but currently.
Okay, I would ask Tricia if you'd let me know, because I would like to speak
Okay,
if I could.
yeah, I'll let the board know
Okay.
when it's for sure scheduled.
Wait, it's going before the commission?
Yeah,
Yes, it's first reading for
Right.
city commission.
Yeah.
And then it'll have a second reading as well.
And can you just repeat exactly what that is? That is the first reading?
So the first reading is just the first public hearing by
Right.
the city commission to vote on whether or not they vote in support of the
Yeah.
proposed amendment to the ordinance.
so ordinances, they go first
Yeah.
reading and then second reading, so this one's just the first time.
But what is the ordinance specifically? They're
So
reviewing?
the ordinance right now, we can designate a district, but it has to be contiguous, so like Belleville Vet contiguous. So this particular ordinance is allowing us to designate districts where it's not beside each other. So you could just somewhere else based
And
on.
the thematic
other-
district would be, let's say, the buildings of an architect. Or some other social thread or architectural thread that may keep them together. So that was the original intent. Anyway, thank you for updating us. And secondly, for the good of the city of Fort Lauderdale, Tricia and Sherry were kind enough to enable my email to be sent to everyone. And I thought this is really important. I don't know if you got it. It was about the petition to save Florida's coastal communities. I'm just going to read parts of this because I know you've read it at home, hopefully. But there are currently two bills before the Florida legislature, which would seriously impact historic preservation in Florida's coastal communities, which is basically every major city in Florida. While claiming to address resiliency and unsafe structures, the bill's broad language would automatically label most older buildings as non-conforming if they do not meet the new construction requirements under the National Flood Insurance Program, which they do not. This would render basically tens of thousands of historic buildings throughout Florida as suddenly non-conforming and lead to speculative demolition, because then they could be torn down. The other provision in this bill is removing local government's powers to discourage demolition by neglect, preventing them from requiring neglected historic structures to be maintained, reconstructed or rebuilt. So basically, an owner could let his building deteriorate to the weather. He would not be charged for that. He could tear down the building because then it would be declared unsafe. And this is basically something that would include all of the Deco district in Miami Beach, which is over 800 historic buildings. It would include all of Fort Lauderdale's historic buildings, St. Augustine, they're in historic district, Key West, Tampa. You basically name every single city in Florida, because every city was founded on waterways or the coastlines. And basically they would all be looking towards a speculative demolition boom brought out by this bill. So there are, as I sent you the email, so Tricia, there was a link to a petition to save the coastal communities. If you can sign it and you can send it to friends, that's also helpful. I did speak to Commissioner Glassman about this, and he's brought this up at the City Commission. He intends to bring it up again, so it is being discussed. My question to both of you would be, would it be helpful if we had a short statement to the City Commission that we're in favor of their efforts to try and save Florida's coastal communities?
I mean, you can. I know that we have someone on staff that is aware of all the legislation, and they work with the lobbyists and different people up in Tallahassee, but if you'd like to, you can, you know,
Well,
whatever.
the legislative session
Session
in
on
this
Friday.
Yeah,
But,
Okay.
you know, she comes before the city commission meeting and speaks about all of these bills
Okay.
and all the different things all the time. But if you'd like to, you're welcome.
I believe that bill passed the House and it passed
Yeah.
with a mile. What I saw said that anything within a mile of the coast
Right.
would be,
Right.
yeah. So
It's the new river. It's a mile within the new river.
I don't know if, I think the coast, I took it like it was a coastline. I don't know that downtown would apply. I mean, I guess some of downtown would be within a mile. I don't know about Sailboat. Right, but that's
It's
the.
vague right
yeah,
now.
Yeah.
That's a good point regarding intercoastal water right versus coastal.
Yeah, what I have, the analysis that I've seen is that like it would absolutely like Ocean Drive and all of Miami Beach would be included. St. Augustine has a lot of concerns, but because it's a mile, I think like once you get within a mile, like I think Sailboat Bend is definitely a mile within,
outside of a mile.
yeah, outside of a mile, that's what I mean, yeah. But I believe that the bill passed the House and they're scheduled to adjourn on Friday, and so this bill will either live or die, and
It'll probably be challenged. Do we recognize someone from the audience, Dr. Bryant?
I just have one little addition, not unfortunately. They did leave out private properties. So it's not anyone's fault, but it's commercial properties that would most likely be destroyed. And
I think you'll need to come up to the.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
think
we
she
can't
can
hear
hear.
you.
She's having the-
Sorry.
one good thing about the bill is if it passes, they exempted private homes from it. So it's basically about commercial, like you said.
But it still includes hotels and everything else.
Yeah, any commercial building. Even if it's designated. Could go down.
I know.
By neglect. And then the second thing is, besides the one mile on either side, as you said, it does include waterways, it's just not the ocean. So of course, Central Bend is.
Everything's on the water, it's within a mile. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so if you send a message to the commission by the time they get it and.
It's gonna be too late, I understand. Okay.
So just one clarification on if it does pass, does that render the entire Sailboat Bend historical designation be nullified at that point?
We'll have to look at that bill before I say anything like that.
Okay.
There's amendments that are taking place almost daily, so it's difficult to keep up with
Sure.
exactly how it's, well, what it would look like and then if it happened.
Right,
So
but it's essentially removing a lot of the power from the city level in order to make those designations.
mhm,
And therefore the board's ability to certainly not nominate anything, but even really
right,
enforce anything.
Well, it's removing every city's
well, and like
power.
Dr. Kreiner mentioned, it does have currently an exemption for single family homes.
Right,
So therefore, with Sailboat Bend being primarily residential,
really wouldn't apply.
it's difficult to say at this time, but until we get the final language, if it passes.
Yeah, and I don't know if the House and Senate bill differ. I don't think they've been reconciled yet.
Yeah, and my understanding was that it passed the Senate, not the House. So at this time.
All right.
But,
Yeah.
but that's just, it's hard to keep up, like I said, because there is a change almost daily or multiple times a day sometimes.
Does your consultant in the city think that if it does pass, which is likely, obviously, since it's if there's a way to challenge it or anything?
I do not know that. I
Yeah.
haven't spoken.
Yeah,
to
her name
the
is
person.
Daphne, I'm not sure. Did she ever, I don't know if she presented it, that talked about this bill before, I'm not sure.
I'm just wondering, if maybe at the next board hearing, maybe once the decision is made, maybe Daphne could spend a few minutes with us and explain what it means.
So I think that would have to be a request to the city commission because that's requiring staff to do work, so. Like I can't tell staff what to do, you know what I mean? So
But can you make that request?
I can't,
You can.
because she's under the city manager, it's a different charter office, so I can't tell her what to do either. You know?
Well, can you find out from her before she leaves?
But what would be the intent of?
Well, just to brief us on what the intent is. I mean, does it include Sailboat Bend? What's the distance from inland waterways? You know, is it 1 mile from the coastline? The beach of Miami Beach is a half-mile wide. Where do you start measuring?
I'm not sure if she gets that deep
Yeah.
into it, but I'll
I'm
be
just
glad.
saying, I'm just saying.
I'll
Yeah.
what I have
think
after.
we will
Between the two of them, they should be able to discern what the bill states.
Yeah, I can do that, and if you're not satisfied, then we can do.
That would be great. Just a little update. That would be great.
Yeah.
Anyone else have anything else?
Well, I have two things, but
Well, no, I was gonna move to adjourn.
okay. I'm so sorry. So for our July 6th meeting, we do need to find an alternate deed. Because we will not have the city attorney present.
Yes, I know you like me, so I'd rather. be-
And
If that's okay.
so it would, right now, we're scheduled for July 6th, which is a Thursday, and that's the week of July 4th, which is, I
Right.
know it's difficult because of the holiday to begin with, so we might want to look at alternate dates starting the next week. And that would be July 10th,
And
would be a Monday, 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th.
we do it the 10th?
I will not be in town this time.
When will you be in town?
I'm coming back to the town, but I won't be
Okay,
Okay, I mean,
another day that week?
here the 11th for the rest of the week.
I can do any day of
Well,
12.
maybe we can do it the 12th, or you can't do it the 12th.
That's it.
I can do any day.
The 11th is.
11th is good?
Yes.
11th. 11th it is.
and that's not a commission meeting.
I don't sure it is.
Okay,
So instead of the 6th, we're gonna be on the 11th.
yeah, you'll have to take a vote on that.
Oh,
And then I'll have to confirm once we have a room available. Since we're looking for.
so we're
space.
taking an informal vote on moving our meeting to
Tuesday,
July
July 11th.
11th. All in favor, say aye.
Can we just?
Aye.
vote
Oh.
Yeah, a motion is.
Can someone make a motion?
I'll make a motion to move the July meeting to Tuesday, July 11th.
Second.
And seconded by Richard.
July.
Oops. All right, I will confirm closer to that date,
Okay.
once we have space. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention is that we're looking to plan a training through the National Alliance of Preservation Commission for the Historic Preservation Board. So again, we're kind of in flux on space, so I'll be sending out an email at some point just to give you some options for dates. And it's not an actual formal board meeting, so I don't think we have to vote on it, but we have to find consensus on the date to hold it. And that will probably be more like August or September. It'll be a little bit later. But just to let you know, the topics of the conversation will be infill construction and then the basics of historic preservation board.
That's good. Good. And a couple of things that either we can add to the agenda next week or we can discuss a little bit today. Because one of them relates to the topic of conversation that came up today with this property that was not designated as contributing or designated historic. So there are properties within Sailboat Bend that are kind of mid-century modernists, that they're kind of a little bit outside of that, you know, period of significance. And then there are plenty of other properties that are not designated historic, but should be reviewed as historic or could be reviewed as historic. So how do we go about doing that? We put that in the agenda next week. Do we nominate properties or discuss properties? How is that done?
You're asking about like properties within certain times specifically?
Well,
not
in Sailboat
necessarily.
Bend, there's a property that was built in 1961, mid-century modernist. So that's designated as contributing. That's necessarily outside the designated period. But this house today was designated not in a period of significance either. It's a mid-century type modernist home. So
Well,
some are,
the
some
board
not.
and the city commission voted on extending the periods of significance through the updated survey a couple of years ago. So it does extend to 1961. As part of that survey, it did identify properties as potential historic landmarks, which one of them appeared before the board today. Any property within the Sailboat Bend Historic District does have to come before the board
Right.
for consideration of a certificate of appropriateness for demolition, whether or not it's contributing or non-contributing.
Right. But the fact that just the house was not contributing yet was kind of a mid-century modernist home. That was why I was kind of bringing it up.
It was outside the period of significance
Right.
as it is now.
Yeah, and at the time it wasn't over 50 years old
Now it
either,
is.
and it is a distinctly different style.
All right, so the other properties that are outside the district are plenty in Coley Hammock and Rio Vista and Victoria Park that are not historic. So would we bring those properties before this board or
The
how does
city,
that happen?
the city is working on a citywide architectural resource survey
Right.
by obtaining grants through the State Historic Preservation Office. And it's an ongoing effort. All of those surveys are available on our website. The board does have the ability to make a motion to initiate a designation application, either for an individual structure or for a historic district.
Is it thought that that architectural survey will have teeth to then bring in jurisdiction based on the scheduled architects and the findings of which properties are gonna be found to be significant or contributing?
The survey state which properties are eligible for designation.
Right.
And identifies which properties could be either individually designated or as part of a district.
Right.
And of course, further research has to be conducted. These surveys are done usually several thousand buildings at the same time. So there always has to be additional research once designation application.
But each
has been
survey
completed.
does point out the architecturally significant buildings
Yeah.
to start with.
Yes,
'Cause I've read some of
and
them.
as of right now, we have, I think, 10 neighborhoods that have been completed, and we're working on 2 more. And then we've applied for a grant that would allow us to survey 2 more. So over time, it would cover the whole city, and at this point in time, if we looked at certain neighborhoods, they really wouldn't have very many properties that are over 50 years old. But if conducted in the future, there may be some that are found to fall in that.
Bring it because there's,
Mhm.
I can just look at like this architect, big name versus Francis Abrua. There are other properties in the city of Fort Lauderdale that are Francis Abrua properties that were built or designed before 1950. So could you just say like 1313 South Andrews Avenue? Can we just pick that house? Can you do an evaluation and say, let's designate that as historic? How is that done?
That's partly why I was trying to get the thematic districts completed.
I mean, if a board member wanted to bring a particular building for discussion, then that can be placed on an agenda for discussion. And the time when we did a few buildings a couple of years ago,
I brought a number of mid-century buildings to the board.
yeah, the board had to take a vote to place that item as an agenda item. And we noticed the property owners so that they could be part of the discussion.
Yep, okay.
So that would be something similar if a board member wanted to nominate.
Your whole list.
Sorry,
We have a whole list.
I do.
Of
You said,
from
but
the
I'm
city or
curious,
from
because there's a lot of
Shelburne?
properties that
Yeah.
pop up into me when I'm driving around or I notice and it's like, these are the significant properties that are gonna be torn down or.
You should take a look at some of the studies that have been done. At least it's a start to point out.
We do have an interactive map online too, so you can take a look and that shows all of the properties that have been identified through the survey. And you can kind of, you know, see, you can point to one and it pops up with a photograph and some information.
I have a quick question related to all these properties.
Mhm.
Whatever happened to the Castro convertible building
It would happen to that.
It was deferred,
by the commission?
The attorney's still
Well-
fighting, are they?
the commission deferred it last year to another date, and then it's been deferred by request of the
Owner.
owner's representative.
So you
And I
finally have been in
believe-
touch with the owner's rep?
I personally,
No, I mean, someone has.
I think they appeared at a meeting.
they appeared at a city commission meeting,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
currently it's scheduled, I think, for August. 17th.
August 15th.
Works for me.
Okay.
Building.
Verbals.
On.
And will you keep us updated for that?
Yeah, it just happened.
And
So it's coming to the commission for what unless it's referred again?
Approval or denial of the designation application.
And do we know what the owner's rep was saying?
Yes.
We have not heard testimony.
Okay.
Good.
All right, and the final thing I guess to bring up is like, we've thrown around some different topic conversations, like creating incentives for people or reviewing some of the procedures that we have in our guidelines. Again, do I need to make a proposal to review some of those, or do I bring them up here as this is the topic I'd like to discuss, or how are some of those things thrown into our discussion at some point, rather than obviously extending any tonight and nobody's aware of it.
And you can vote to put it on that agenda.
Put it on the agenda.
Because it seems like there's a few things that keep coming up, like the fences. And it's like, let's have a discussion about that and see if we can alter it so it doesn't continue to come up before us and it can just be done by administrative approval.
Yeah.
Or, like,
Windows in the back of houses.
right, exactly. Clarify some of these things so that they're not like this debate or frustration because we're kind of mixed precedents versus what's in the rules and
Well, the ordinance was updated a few years ago, so anything that's in the rear of a property or not visible from the right of way, that's something that staff can administratively approve. Something that wasn't included was the fences and,
The height of the fences and
yeah,
the
and
materials.
Shari and I have been working on an update to the sailboat bend ordinance. I've been working on it, we've been working on it for several years, but it got sort of delayed because we paused to have conversations with a small working group that was formed by the Sailboat Bend Civic Association a few years ago. So we did that and then the pandemic happened. So
Can we pull that into a draft in August when we have the workshop? To start looking at it?
I'm finishing the draft and then after that's completed, going to share it with the Sailboat Bend Civic Association first to give them the opportunity to
Sure.
comment and weigh in on it. So I'm not sure, I'm not sure of the timing.
Okay.
Just yet, but I
It
think-
will come back to us. It's-
yeah, it will be scheduled for an agenda for recommendation by the board. at some point.
So we should talk about, it's more than just about fences.
Yes, it's more than just about fences. The design guidelines sometimes are a little outdated. And we also wanted to make sure we were aligning the language with the updated language of the architectural resource survey that was passed in identifying different procedural routes for contributing and non-contributing properties. So giving non-contributing properties more flexibility versus contributing properties. Where, we want to make sure they're preserved in a particular way and match historic materials and styles, especially what's visible from the right of
So
way.
perhaps we can keep the board updated.
Yeah.
When
Well,
you'll be
one
ready.
thing that came up particularly this past month with the storms that came in is that all this rainwater causes problems with all these historic properties. So there is no incentive for these property owners to preserve or maintain their properties. They just let them go down and demolish because it costs too much money. And so we've talked about this repeatedly. It's like there's no incentive for people to maintain their properties. And you got to come up with a way to incentivize people. There is a 20% tax reduction for commercial property, but there is nothing like that for residential properties. And how do you do that? So didn't they save 20% on the city taxes each year if it's a contributing property or a historic property within the city of Fort Lauderdale? That little bit of savings every year could go to maintaining those properties or making them so that they're preserved, because preserving or maintaining is preserving. That's what it says.
And that is
So-
limited by state statute.
Yeah, the taxes, we already.
You can't do that through the city and say 20% the city taxes is,
We're-
because you do that with abatements with an application for
Because it's
ad
allowed
valorem.
in state statute.
Yeah, unfortunately, the state government has jurisdiction over that, and we have tried, we have spoken with others as well, and the taxes is a loser for us, we tried, I have emails.
Right.
But we're open to any suggestions, if you want, we can put it on an agenda and you can go through any of your recommendations.
And a recent commission memo was provided to the city commission, and it's available on the city's website. All the commission memos are, but I can forward that to everybody.
Okay.
And it does outline every single incentive that is available.
That would be
There's-
good to
Yeah.
know.
In sewers, drainage rather.
So do you want us to forward the existing stuff to you first and then we can schedule something later, or do you want to schedule something?
Why?
We can make a motion to put it on the agenda. I guess it's really what it's coming down to. To talk about next month or the next meeting or something like that, where we can not be prepared for it rather than obviously everybody wants to go.
So do you want to do a motion on any recommendations for incentives?
I think
Or
we should
something?
first see what the city is
As reviews at this point.
before we propose something more concrete.
But do you want it as a discussion on the agenda for next time?
Yes, at the very least.
All right, so I'll make a motion to add in the agenda next month, a review or discussion on changes to the
Right.
city's historic guidelines.
So incentives or
So
preservation?
the
guidelines?
incentives we put in the ULDR, not the guidelines.
So are you talking?
Could be both.
Yeah.
It's just
Guidelines
these
and
topics of
ULDR.
conversation.
So the citywide guidelines or the sailboat then is material and design guidelines
Could be both.
and incentives. So it's gonna be a long meeting.
Anything that the board members have or
Okay.
concern that they want to raise as topics of discussion for further changes in the guidelines or.
So you would just need a second to
Second, okay,
Okay.
call the vote.
okay.
Is it all in?
All in favor? Yes.
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? No opposed. The motion carries.
Move to adjourn.
Second. Third,
Thank you.
All four?
Thank you.
good.
Aye.